Hey there everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Orochi by Kazuo Umezz. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing these things. These are two hardcover volumes from Viz that are collecting work by classic horror works by the same guy that did the Drifting Classroom series. I have those Drifting Classroom books. Haven't looked at them on the channel, but I really enjoyed those ones. So I grabbed these. I've had the volume 1 since it came out, and I thought me and Sean were going to talk about it, but we've gotten up to all kinds of other stuff, so I figured I'd just go ahead and take a look at both of them now that volume 2's out. I'm pretty sure that Kazuo Umezz is also a huge influence on Junji Ito, who I just looked at his new book, the Liminal Zone, so I thought this would also be a good time since that book came out, and this seems to be an influence to really dig into it. These books immediately reminded me, if I'm thinking about Junji Ito, it reminds me of his Tome work, where there's kind of like this female that just shows up in these, like, female, I don't even want to call it protagonist. In the case of Orochi, it's more like a narrator that's in the story or something that shows up in these different situations and influences them. I've never finished reading Tome, so I don't know how accurate the comparison is, but that jumped to mind. It's a strange story format in these books, I think, having the narrator also be kind of like the Deus Ex Machina for each of these stories. They're definitely seem very influenced by like the EC horror stories. I get some of that vibe. I'm not super, I haven't read a ton of the EC stuff. I look at the art, but I have a hard time reading the stories. Something I really like about the Orochi ones is, unlike the Viz ones, you can see that there's no like captions kind of over explaining things. Like the narrator doesn't really over explain that much, which to me is my impression of the old EC things. And these can play out for longer. Like this whole book is 300 pages, and it only has 2 stories in it, and the stories are kind of different lengths as well. So I like that the stories just run for about as long as they run. You'll see one starts at page 5 and one starts at page 97. So the second one's quite a bit longer, and I like that. I like that better than the short, like, okay, we got 8 pages and it's got to have a twist at the end. They still have like twists throughout them, and they kind of follow that format. But with the more decompressed stuff, you get more into the emotional states of the characters, and I don't know. I like that better. So in this first one, I'll just go through and kind of point out what the stories are about without giving away the twists, and show some things that I like. This first one is Orochi, the titular narrator, Deus Ex Machina character, shows up in the life of these 2 sisters who are cursed with, they turn a certain age, they're going to start getting ugly. If they turn 18, they start getting ugly, and that just causes, you know, conflict in the family and some horrific circumstances. The art in this looks like it would be really good. Like, there's some images like this that are just really classic horror images, like the woman in the nightgown ghostly figure. That's an archetype I've been messing around with for the Bound story that I want to do, trying to figure out how to make it different than the archetype, but this is a really good archetypal image here. Unfortunately, and some of the Drifting Classroom stuff had the same problem, but not as bad as this book, Viz doesn't seem to have access to the original art or good negatives of it, because the Viz books are usually really well reproduced, and these books are really gummed up. This first volume actually has some pages that look good, but the second volume's bad pretty much all the way through. The same with the Drifting Classroom. There were some bad pages, but there was some really good pages, and you know, I felt like that evened it out, but these are pretty much gummed up all the way through. So that makes it a little bit difficult, but you can tell underneath there's some really amazing art going on. In this is still the first story. Orochi now shows up as a nurse, so she kind of is always showing up in different situations, and she has like this magic power that she uses to influence the situation. Oh no, this is the second story now. Yeah, this is the second story, Bones. Yeah, so now she's a nurse. She's not just like a maid showing up at someone's door. I'd be curious if someone's read this whole thing, if a larger narrative develops. That's one of the problems I'm having with this book, is like who this mysterious character is and why she just shows up in random people's lives, kind of like casually interested in them, like studying them from afar and like kind of telling their stories, but then will drop out of the story for a long time. And it just seems to be like Umezz wanted to tell a bunch of horror stories, but felt like he needed to have like a crypt keeper character, and then made like this innovation, maybe, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't read the EC, but it seems kind of innovative to me from the EC stuff that the crypt keeper would then get involved in the stories. So I don't know. It's interesting but weird. It goes too unexplained, at least in the first 2 volumes for me. And it gets hard to want to keep being invested in it, especially with the poor reproduction. There's things like this, too, that I wonder if this is how Umezz drew it, or if it's a reproduction problem where there'll be these big, just like clunky, gummed up looking shadows that don't really fit in the drawing. They just flatten out. And I suspect that's partly reproduction issues, like there was cross-hatching or tone or something there, because there are some panels later in some of the other volumes where you get that. So it's just a little bit difficult. I haven't read Uzumaki, but this just kind of reminds me of the imagery I see with that. So I'm having to look at like influences. A contemporary of Umezz would have been Shigeru Mizuki. So I'm seeing some of that influence in this work, and I don't know which way the influence went back and forth, but the pages are so dark and gummed up, you know you're losing a lot of details. But I could definitely see this being like a Mizuki Pro background, looking really cool with like the stippling and all the little textures. Part of the way I know, you can see it here, this is more well reproduced with all the little stippling. Part of the way I know a lot is getting lost is so much of the cross-hatching just blacks out, and you can tell there's like maybe patterns drawn behind the cross-hatching that it went on top of that you're not seeing, like patterns on the wallpaper or something. So it just gets kind of difficult to look at. Here you have a panel that's much more well reproduced. In volume 1, you do get ones where they have some better resources at Viz, and you get a sense of what the art would look like if it was more cleaned up. It's still not great. There's still some fill in. I can tell just by, you know, things look too thick and gummed up. But it gives you a sense of what the art could be. Here on this page where you got this like zombie guy crawling out of the ground is where I really start to see, okay, like a lot of Johnny Craig vibes in my mind is the first thing that comes to mind, and you start to see the EC influence that Umezz was probably bringing over into Japan. And then another Junji Ito one is there's this scene where Orochi pulls her hair out and like throws one strand of hair and it latches onto the woman's head. And having read Censor, there's like these hairs that always attach to people's heads. So I don't know if that in Censor is like referencing back to Ito's love for Umezz, or if because in Censor also there's like this weird angel hair coming out of the volcanoes thing, and I had to look it up, and that is a real thing. So I don't know if there's just within Japanese mythology something about the hair and the hair attaching to the heads that's kind of like a classic trope that they're coming back to, but it's something I noticed similar between the 2 books. So that's volume 1. Volume 2 has 3 stories in it, so each story is a little bit shorter. I definitely had to approach these books one story at a time. That's a lesson I'm learning when there's not a consecutive story, that I can't treat it like a graphic novel all the way through. It's a collection of stories that came out, you know, a month or maybe months apart. So I'm having to read it that way, and that's making it more enjoyable. But I'm still struggling with like I'm not sure I'm going to keep buying these. Some brutal scenes though, like this kid getting stabbed in the neck. This first one's about a kid that has a scar, and Orochi's kind of just watching his life develop, and she always gets involved, and her involvement always kind of makes things worse, which is I think the scariest part about all these stories. There's this like kind of casual observer who has magical powers that can kind of influence what's going on and have an impact on your life. I think that's more horrific to me, that there's an active Deus Ex Machina narrator that could be in our lives meddling about that's scarier to me than any of the particular circumstances, which is why I'm curious if this series goes somewhere more. And like on the back of volume 1, they described it as a mysterious young woman slithers her way into the lives of unsuspecting people, like the legendary multi-tailed serpent for which she is named. And it kind of talks about obsession and stuff, but I didn't get as much of that in volume 2. So I don't know, please let me know. The second story here is just about a guy that moves away from his home, you know, goes to be a city boy from the farm town and comes back to find some odd changes in his hometown. This one had a really bizarre moment in it where for 2 panels, they're just straight up doing like a dot-toned photographs in there when every other panel throughout the rest of the 2 volumes are hand-drawn. Orochi is talking about, I didn't know what it was, but there was something, the trees, the mountains, the people working in the field, it felt off to her. But while she continues that narration, we go back to drawing. So I get why if you're trying to make things seem extra surreal, you would plop in photographs, but then I would keep that through the whole thing. So I didn't understand that. And like, obviously, as an artist or as a studio, not lazy with backgrounds by any means. So I found that like halftone dot pattern photographs just a really strange approach in this book. And then the last story, Key, is about it's basically like a boy who cried wolf story, about a kid who's always lying, so when things actually go wrong, no one believes him. And again, Orochi's just kind of casually interested in this kid. It starts out with her saying, a scary person can be nice and a nice person scary. Therefore, in truth, the scary person is scary, but does that make the nice person nice? A person makes a building makes a person. I want a key, the key to the truth. And that whole string of words there didn't make any sense to me. Like, what all of a sudden, like, the logic between each sentence is. I don't know if this is in reference to a poem or like something in Japanese culture I'm not familiar with that has the quote key up here. Like maybe it's a song, but there's no translator's note explaining that. So I was a bit confused going into that one. And then, like I said, this is pretty much just a boy who cried wolf with this extra kind of metaphysical intercessor narrator coming in and messing about even more. So I don't know. Just the fact that it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere kind of makes me not want to buy another volume of this. If people tell me that this builds up to something, then I would like to keep getting it. So I really do want to know. Or if Viz, and I know Viz always does a good job at this reproduction. If they had the actual resources to do what they can do, I would be more interested in this. But with the art being reproduced like really, really poorly in a lot of places, especially in volume 2, and then with the stories just kind of going nowhere, I don't think I'm going to keep buying these. So if someone has a reason why I should, please let me know. But for those of you who haven't checked this out yet and are interested in it, I don't know. It's up to you. I would say get it if you're really interested as a record of its place in history. I didn't find them particularly entertaining. They're not bad, but they weren't particularly entertaining as stories. They're kind of formulaic horror stories with not much extra juice on them, in my opinion. And then the reproduction isn't enough to really just sit around and enjoy the art. I would recommend the Drifting Classroom books. There's 3 big hardcover ones. And those, even though they have some really good art reproduction and some sketchy reproduction, the story in that I found really compelling, and it was one long narrative that I could get sucked into. So I quite enjoyed that. But this collection of these shorter stories, I'm either missing something or, you know, it's just not the kind of thing that's for me. But I'm not going to say it's a bad book and that people shouldn't get it. There's plenty of reasons to get it. I'm just a little skeptical if I'll keep buying these. I mean, maybe if there's only one more volume, I'll get it just to be complete or something. But if this is like some 10-volume series or something, it would need to add up to something more in the end. The best way that you can help support what we're doing here on the channel is to check out the rest of the books that Sean has coming out or has already put out from Living the Line. So we'll take a look at some of those right now. The Abolition of Man is a 5-issue mini-series done by myself and Sean in collaboration with the Midjourney AI. What you're seeing here is the cover to issue 1 and the first couple pages of issue 1. This first issue, we fed it an essay by C.S. Lewis, and this is just the imagery that the computer spat back at us. Issues 2 and 3 are a narrative, starting with the story that I wrote when I was 21, and then Sean's going to write issue 3, picking up where I left off. In this one, I'm kind of trying to force the AI to give me the images I want, and then doing some tweaking in Photoshop to get these kind of colored looks on it. For issue 4, we're turning the task of writing over to the AI as well. So the AI has written the script, and then we've just put that into the Midjourney AI, and it's turned out art. The script and the art is some of the absolutely most horrific stuff I've ever seen. We're a bit scared to even publish this issue. And I don't have any art to show for it yet, but Sean and I have decided to do a 5th issue of Abolition as well, because we have someone who we're really, really excited to have on board, providing an essay for that 5th issue that we'll illustrate, and we'll announce more about that soon. There's also Yokoyama Yuichi's Plaza, which is a totally intense manga by an artist who has somehow figured out how to distill manga down to its purest essence. This book was successfully funded on Kickstarter, but if you missed the Kickstarter, you can order it through any comic store, any bookstore, Amazon, any place that you would normally get your graphic novels from. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.